Hello and welcome to a live Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri, and yes, I'm live. I'm live and fashionably late. Yes, squat and peace. Sorry, I pushed the show back a little bit already. We started at 2:30 today instead of 2 because we have a lot going on in the house. And just going to warn you up front. I'm holding this little doggy because there's going to be another plumber coming today, and I just want to keep him from barking very loud like last time. I think if I hold him, it'll be okay. My husband's also recording part of an album today, so we've got a violinist here, and there's a lot of things happening. So I apologize up front if there's any chaos during this video. But I wanted to go live. I wanted to see you guys and have a lot on my mind this morning. I'm hoping you can help me think through some of it and figure out how to articulate some of it. And any questions or challenges to what I'm saying are welcome because they help me to better formulate my ideas, and I appreciate them. So, with all that being said, welcome. I appreciate you guys being here. We're doing some kink shaming today, Evo Trash. We're doing some kink shaming. um, we've come to expect chaos, Keri. Yeah, I guess that's what, in a house that we're constantly renovating with all these issues, I guess that's, yeah, there you go. It's a little bit chaotic. We got some weird plumbing issues going on, and we haven't yet found a plumber who can figure out what's happening. So that's something. That's something that's going on. Okay. Can you guys hear the violin in the next room? If you can, it's beautiful. So hopefully it won't be distracting. Anyway, I've been working, as I mentioned, I've been working a couple new gig jobs, and so my schedule is quite a bit. It's more full than it was last year, and so last night I was working pretty late, and just it's good to be out, like doing a lot of different things again. For a while, I just had the one gig job, and now there's like 3 or 4, so it's a lot of different things going on, and I'm having a good time. I hope you're having a good, productive new year yourself. Okay. This is what we're talking about today. There's been this is a topic that I've been, do you ever have a big topic that you're sort of wrestling with in the back of your mind for a while? Like maybe for months, you'll think about it again and you're kind of figuring out what you think about it. This is what I've been thinking about for a while, and it coincides with a bunch of other stories and topics that are in the news right now. And it's the idea of making moral judgments great again, and being okay with things like so-called kink shaming. And one of the reasons I started thinking about this is one of my favorite true crime podcasters is Annie Elise. I highly recommend her channel. I love the way she tells a story and tells a true crime story. But one of the things she does quite frequently, and this isn't to pick on her, a lot of younger people do this. I've noticed it. And I think I probably used to do this when I was in the woke world, is she will mention something that's usually something horrible and degenerate and disgusting, describing some behavior that people in the story were participating in. And then she will say immediately after, I don't mean to kink shame anybody, but blah, blah, blah. And every time I hear her say that, I'm one of those people who talks back at the TV or talks back at the podcast, and she'll say, not to kink shame anyone. I don't mean to kink shame. I'm like, kink shame, girl? What is wrong with you? What's wrong with you? You should be kink shaming. And so the more I've thought about this, it's like I've realized that woke ideologies had many negative impacts on society. And one of those impacts has been that they have pushed this postmodernist idea that there's no objective truth, and there's no objective morality. There's no good or evil. And they've pushed this idea, and you will recognize this when you hear them say things like, well, that's your truth. This is my truth. I'm speaking my truth. And oftentimes when they're saying that, what they're saying is not even true, or it's an opinion, or it's something that's false, or it's something they wish were true, but it's not. But they'll say, but this is my truth, And this idea that truth is subjective, and you can have a truth and I can have a truth, and they can be different things. And, we don't all subscribe to that there's no such thing as objective truth. Woke has really pushed this idea. They are pushing things like there's no such thing as biological sex, for example. They are pushing lies like, a man can be a woman and he's just living his truth, but they say she's just living her truth, right? They push these lies. And at the same time, this is what's so weird about woke. They have that postmodernist influence where they kind of try and spread this idea that no one can decipher anything. There's no up or down. There's no good or evil. There's no right or wrong. There's no such thing as truth or fiction, and they push that. But at the same time, they do push a moral framework, something that operates as a moral framework. They do push something that operates as, this is how you're trying to how to be a good person. And funny enough, their version of how to be in the world, their moral code, they present it as if it is objective truth. They do the same thing as, Christianity. I believe in objective truth. I believe in God. They believe in an objective truth. They believe their ideology is the best way of looking at the world, and a better way of looking at the world than Christianity, for example. But they pretend like they're not doing that. That's what's weird. The postmodernist influence is there. So they pretend like they're not doing that they're not presenting a moral framework for how to view the world. But they do. They do present this moral framework. And so, for example, they would say castrating and mutilating and sterilizing children is good. And if you oppose it, you're bad. They present things as good and bad. Even when they say things like don't kink shame, they are making a moral judgment. They are saying it's wrong to make a moral judgment. That itself is a moral judgment. You are saying something is wrong. That's a moral judgment. You're saying something's bad. That's a moral judgment. So they make these moral judgments all the time based on their woke morality, which I would call immorality, because I think their morality is upside down. But they make these moral judgments all the time. They'll say it's wrong to kink shame. That's a moral judgment they're making, right? And so they've somehow, it's sort of infiltrated culture the way that ideology does, where people pick up pieces of it. It becomes like the water that a fish swims in, and the fish doesn't notice the water. Like, what water? It's just what they live in. And so if you're living in a culture that's been permeated by a particular ideology, you may not even notice that you've picked up some of those ideological tenets and that you're operating with them, and you may not even know what belief system they came from. But a lot of young people, like my favorite true crime podcaster, will say these things without even knowing where it came from. It's just an accepted truth in this current culture, where they will say, don't kink shame. I don't mean to kink shame. They'll say that. Now, to give you some context, the most recent time I heard Annie Elise say this, and I've heard her say it quite a bit. And again, not to pick on her, I hear lots of people say this. I think I used to say it. But the most recent case, let me just give you an example that she was discussing. I'm pulling up an article here about it. She was discussing this case. And this is an article from The Guardian. It's from this year. A eunuch maker appears in London court on GBH charges. This is the case of Marius Gustavson. And Marius Gustavson, he was running a website for castration, where men who had mostly men, there were a couple women on there, but it was thousands and thousands of men, where he was running a website where men who had castration fetishes or other types of amputation fetishes would post and would meet each other, and then they would pay him large sums of money to castrate them, to cut their male genitals off. And then, so he was charging them money for being on the site. He would film all of the operations, which he's not a doctor. A lot of these people ended up in the hospital, in the ER. And there was also cannibalism involved, where he had photos on his phone of different genitalia that he had cooked and was eating with and salads and stuff. It was very disgusting. Some of these people also ended up coming out and saying that being on his site was a bit like being in a cult, and that he had manipulated them into doing this. And so he eventually went to trial over this, and he made loads and loads of money doing it, not just through charging people for being on the site, but also charging them for the operations where he would remove body parts, and then he would put up videos of it and charge more money for people to watch the disgusting videos. And then get this, he was saving human body parts and he was selling them on the website. So if you wanted to buy the genitals of a person, he had a fridge full of human body parts that he was mailing out to people. Now, he and others were arguing that this was okay to do because the people were consenting, that these were consenting adults, and they were consenting to having him mutilate them and castrate them and cut off different body parts and torture them and stuff, and that therefore it's okay, it's just a kink, right? That's what they were arguing. And I'm sorry, Dion, I know that story made me puke. She says, yeah, I should have said a warning up front. I'm going to talk about some really dark, disgusting people today. I should have said that. But here, let me share this tab instead. This was the outcome of his trial. He ended up being sentenced to 22 years. This is him. He was married to a man for a long time before he started doing all this, and his ex-husband came forward and said he had never seen any indications of this back when they had been married, and that he kind of went crazy after they broke up. But I'm one of those people who thinks that stuff is lying dormant in a person forever. He was described in a 3-day sentencing at the Old Bailey as a lunatic, an arch manipulator, and a butcher. He ran a lucrative business in extreme body modifications. And he said he had body integrity dysphoria and BID. Now, if you guys watched my coverage of the WPATH files, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health files, and all the leaks that came out around that, you might remember this phrase, body integrity dysphoria, BID, because there were doctors in those leaks, in those documents, who were discussing not just so-called, like, not just gender dysphoria and all of their experimental surgeries and things that they were doing on some of these people, and some of these people being minors, people who wanted experimental things like nullification surgery, where you cut off their genitals and you don't even try and create the opposite sex genitalia, you just leave it nothing. Like, some of these people are going in saying, I want to be like a Ken doll down there, or I want you to, there were women going in and saying, take off my breasts and don't put the nipples back on. I don't want to look human up there, and there are doctors willing to do this. And in those WPATH leaks, there were doctors talking about patients who had stuff other than so-called gender dysphoria. They were talking about patients who had things like body integrity dysphoria, where the patient was saying, I believe that I was born in the wrong body, and that my true body doesn't have a leg, and I want you to cut my leg off. And there were doctors in those files talking about whether or not they could do this for their patients. Whether or not they could do this. Well, that's what he was doing. And he was hiding it behind this diagnosis. And he was saying, well, these people have body integrity dysphoria, and also they're consenting. And it was all the same arguments that they make. It's all the same arguments that they make about mutilating and sterilizing kids. Of course, kids can't consent. They're not legally old enough to. He even had some young people participating in this with him. The youngest I heard was 17. So, there were tons of, I hesitate to say victims, but some of them do view themselves as victims, others don't. But there were thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of people on this site. And he was doing operations and surgeries with no medical training and no background. He had also had his own genitalia removed in one of these surgeries. He went to a sex worker, this guy who specializes in so-called kink again, and he paid that guy 500 pounds to cut off his genitalia and film it. And that's what kind of got him into doing this with other people. I'm giving you the background on this guy because this is the most recent one I heard where this true crime podcaster who I love was talking about it. And in the context of discussing it and talking about some of the disgusting, degenerate things that he was involved with, she said, they were consenting adults, and and I don't mean to kink shame, but it's like, no, honey. I think at the very least, castrating people, taking off their body parts, mutilating them as part of a fetish, saving their body parts, selling them, eating their body parts, I think it's pretty safe to kink shame. I think we as a society should kink shame. I think it's a good thing to shame certain aberrant behaviors, certain perverted behaviors. I do believe in absolute truth. I do believe in objective morality, in good and evil. I do believe certain things are, I'm a Christian, so I believe there are certain things that are about making ourselves, there's a path that is about making ourselves holy, trying to become more holy, following the Holy Spirit, following the way of God. And there are other things that are completely on the path of darkness. And if you are not a person of strong enough character to look at this kind of stuff, castrating people, cannibalism, stuff like this, and say, that's objectively wrong. Like it's wrong. There's a reason why, if you're a normal person, it presses your disgust sensitivity button. There's a reason that's built into you. And I believe that God built that into us, again, because I'm a Christian. But you don't have to be a Christian to have that disgust sensitivity to know what I'm talking about. There are certain things that in here, not just in here in your head, but in your heart. There are certain things in your soul that that is evil. That's repulsive. That's disgusting. Yes, we can say that's bad. This is bad. People who do this, there's something wrong with them. It's okay to say that. It's okay to make moral judgments. It's actually good to make moral judgments. And something interesting that's happened is that a lot of people have, I think, correctly recognized that the moral framework of woke ideology is wrong and bad, that the things that they claim are wrong and the things that they claim are right, that they have a messed up system. It's their system is their judgment is off, but they failed. People have correctly recognized that the woke value system is wrong, but they failed to recognize that they've been influenced by the postmodernist part of woke, which says, but there is no right and wrong. There are, moral judgments are bad. You shouldn't have any moral judgments. It's like they've fallen sway to that. They've given in to that. They've sort of soaked that up by osmosis. And even I had some of that in me and have had to get rid of that and divest of that. Like that whole idea of like, I shouldn't judge people. I shouldn't judge behaviors. I shouldn't say, I think that XYZ behavior is good for people or bad for people. I shouldn't do that. No, you should. You should. Don't let the existence of people with bad ideology and bad morality prevent you from orienting yourself towards a good ideology and a good and a true morality. You can't let it prevent you from doing that. You're going to end up somewhere in this abyss that they want you in, where you're just like, I don't stand for anything. I don't know what's right and what's wrong. I don't know what's up and down. I don't know what's good and evil. I don't know what's true and what's not. that's just as lost as being on the path of a bad ideology and a bad moral system. This is my first time talking, or well, one of my first times, I guess, talking about some of this stuff, and so you're watching me as I'm thinking it through in real time. So I hope that makes sense. And if I can, if you have questions, if you want to challenge me on some of it, feel free, because it helps me to feel it out, to think it out. It helps me to better articulate it and to express what it is I've been thinking about. And maybe you've been thinking about some of these things too. And this came up again today because there's a lot of attention online about the fact that a very popular and influential podcaster, Benny Johnson, is going to be, I guess, doing a live show with Andrew Tate. And so there were several people who had some thoughts about that. And I was actually pleasantly surprised to see that there were many people who were critical of that. And let me just show you how he promoted. First of all, let me show you how he promoted the discussion with Andrew Tate. It wasn't like an interview where I'm going to be asking tough questions or anything like that, or about his pending trials or any of the allegations against him, or asking about his own admitted bad behavior and the stuff his own words, his own videos. No, it was sort of this cool promo where it's a picture of him and Andrew Tate both wearing these glasses with fire behind them, and they're he's announcing he's going to be joining the Benny Show live to talk about Trump and some other stuff. And I was very pleasantly surprised to see how many people were voicing their disappointment in this. And I'm also disappointed in it. A couple things about this. As I said, I believe in objective morality. I believe in good and evil. And I believe in free will and the freedom of association. And I don't think it's a good thing to associate with or to help grifters, con artists, snake oil salesmen, bad people, to help them with their grift, to help them spread their influence, to help them gain a larger audience. I don't think that's a good thing. I never have. And I don't think, obviously, I mean, do we have to do a whole, I know I've covered Tate before, but do we have to do a whole nother episode on him? Because I will, I guess, if I need to. There are several great Twitter accounts that have gone through and just detailed and cataloged with his own videos and his own words the fact that this man, this sniveling, beclowned con artist, made his name and his status, his station in life, through pimping and prostituting women and scamming men and shaking down men and bragging about it, bragging about how he creates porn and the losers buy the porn from him. He's disgusting. He's a bad guy. And I believe everyone can be redeemed through Jesus Christ. I haven't seen that with him. I haven't seen any redemption arc with him. There's no repentance. There's no God gave me a new heart. There's no change in who he is. He's still a snake oil salesman. He's still disgusting. And I think it's an unwise decision to associate with someone like him or to help him with the grift that he's doing. I absolutely do. And as I said, I was pleasantly just surprised to see a lot of people were sharing that same criticism and sort of disappointment of like, ugh, really, this is what we're doing, propping up this guy as if he's some sort of male role model. He's not. He's not. If you think there were some people in there arguing, I guess Tate followers who were arguing in these comments and talking about how he's a strong man. He is not a strong man. I'm sorry to laugh because it actually is pretty sad if you think that. Does all it takes is some expensive suit for a person to put on, like this oily charlatan puts on an expensive suit and a pair of sunglasses and fire in the background, and that's it. For him to accumulate money off of pimping out women and shaking down men, and that's enough, that makes him a strong man. No, this is a person of weak moral character. This is a weak person. He's not someone to emulate. And the reason I say it's sad is because the only people it's almost unfathomable to me that anybody would say, oh yeah, that's a strong guy and a good male role model. And the only people who would say that are people who, I think, sadly, have never had a strong man in their life. They've never had a male role model, a person of strong character who doesn't bend in the wind, a person who's wise, a person with humility instead of hubris, a person with confidence, not ego. Not fragile ego, but actual confidence. A sturdy figure of masculinity. They've never had someone like that to look up to. And so they look at this charlatan. For me, it's analogous to people who fall for these oily, shyster televangelists. Like there's a large percentage of people who fall for those guys too. And I guess in that case, same thing. All it takes is an expensive Italian suit, showing off some money. And they're like, who cares how they behave, I guess, right? It's like, it's kind of amazing that it works on a certain segment of the population, that it works on them. And so I saw some people that were saying, oh, he's a strong guy. No, he's not. He's not a strong guy. He's a weak guy. And if you're following him, it's like you're following a Pied Piper. It's keeping you away from an actual strong male role model, Jesus Christ. It's keeping you away from actual strong male role models in your personal life. And I would say it's on you to find those. If you've never had one, it's on you to find those. You have to go out and search. You have to find a community of people who are strong in moral character. God will show you a path. The strongest men in my life, the best role models I've ever had for traditional masculinity, for strength of character, they're not internet stars anyway. They're not. These are men I know from my church, my community. My pastor's a great one. These are people who you almost have to drag them into the spotlight because they shirk from it, and they have so much stuff going on in the real world where they're shepherding their immediate flock. It's almost like they don't, maybe I've thought about this a lot too. This is a topic for another day, but I've thought about, maybe the people of the best moral character are never going to run for political office. They're never going to create a platform with as much influence as Andrew Tate because their priorities are different. Maybe that's just the way it is. Same thing with the size of churches. I don't know if this is true. It's just something I've thought about. Maybe there's a point at which a church hits a certain level of growth and becomes so big that the priorities start to change. I don't know. But you need to go out. If you think Andrew Tate is a positive, a strong male role model, you need to go out and find some actual strong men of character. They are out there. It just tells me you've never been around one of those kind of men. And that's what's sad. Okay, another thing people were saying in some of the comments is that it is leftist to say, oh, I don't think Andrew Tate's a good person, and I'm disappointed that someone would associate with him or platform him, help his grift reach a larger audience, that's somehow leftist. No, it's not. Leftists say there's no such thing as objective truth or objective morality. There's no such thing as good and evil. It's a very leftist thing. It's a very leftist thing to say, hey, anything goes, anyone goes, any behavior goes. Who am I to judge? It's a very leftist thing to tell good people that it's a good thing to make your name and your status in life off of degeneracy and off of prostituting women and scamming men out of money, that's a good thing. It's really leftist to try and convince good people of that like if they have an objection to those things, there's something wrong with them. That's very leftist, if you want to talk about leftism. John says, are we allowed to call things abnormal again? Heck yes, we are. Heck yes, we are. I think we should be identifying. It's true that some things are normal and some things are abnormal. It's true that some things are good and some things are bad. I think it might be easiest if I'm going to show you a couple of things people are saying because it might be easiest for me to explain it this way. Oh gosh, first, let me show you this. So a Twitter user named Abby Libby shared this. And she's sharing an old tweet of Andrew Tate's. And this is where he said in all caps, I make porn, all caps. I made so much porn that I made millions. You consume porn. I am God. He said this. He still says stuff like this. I am God. He says stuff recently. He said, I'm the smartest man in the world. What? How can you follow a guy like that? You think that's strong? That kind of weak ego BS? It's just laughable. It's clownish. Anyway, he said, I make porn. I made so much porn that I made millions. You consume porn. I am God. You're a fucking loser. But we all knew that already. Learn how to make money by making porn here. This is back when he was selling his courses to men on how they too could learn how to pimp out women online. Okay. And so she makes a great point. She says, Candace Owens says that Jews run the porn industry to destroy us. Andrew Tate says, well, he makes porn and that everybody needs to learn how to make porn. And Candace Owens is full of hearts for him. Full of hearts. Yeah, she's running cover for him today, like she always does. She's another one who I've just given up on to be open about it. And so one of the things she's trying to say is that people who have always said they believe in the marketplace of ideas are now criticizing Benny Johnson for having this, for associating with and elevating the platform of Andrew Tate. And what I would say to that is, you're pretending like the marketplace of ideas is a communist marketplace if you're trying to suggest that all ideas must be bought, that we have to buy all of them and we have to give them all equal value. No, thank you. It's a marketplace. It's a marketplace. It's an open marketplace. It's a free and open one. And in a free and open marketplace, the customers are allowed to say, hey, that's a shitty product or that's a shitty idea. I don't think I'll buy it. Actually, I think it's pretty bad that you're pushing it. That's what happens in the open marketplace. Duh. That's the point. That's the whole point. There are other people in the comments who are trying to conflate social shaming, social and moral judgments with legality. And this is a complete straw man. It takes you down this ridiculous path where they'll say things like, I thought you believed in free speech and that everyone should be allowed. Yeah, I do. Great. We're all on the same page. I do. Benny Johnson should be able to speak to whoever he wants to. And I should be able to speak whatever I want to and say, hey, I think that's I think that's bad discernment. I think that's a bad judgment call. I think that's unwise to do that. That's what free speech is. If you're trying to talk about social cultural morality. And then there's somebody over here trying to talk about legality. They're trying to change the subject and get you over here to have an argument that you're not even having. The fastest way I found to shut that down is just to tell, like, I agree with you. I'm not arguing about the legality. He can say whatever he wants. Great. And I can say what I want, which is that I think he's a shitty person and he has shitty ideas and he teaches a shitty way to live. And people should not be emulating him or looking to him as a role model. That's the way it works. That's the way free speech works. I've got a couple more examples. If you're struggling with this, or you're like, I don't know, Keri, let me show you this one. I've got another, I think, which should be an easy one. Look at this one. Remember this guy? I put him in the thumbnail art. This is Sam Brinton. Sam Brinton was the Biden admin. He was in the Biden administration. I think he was in charge of nuclear waste. And he is this complete con artist who, when he was younger, he was famous for lying about and testifying before Congress about how his Christian religious parents had forced him to go to conversion therapy to stop being gay, and how they had abused him. And later it was revealed that he had lied about this. At one point he said it was a doctor who did the conversion therapy. Another point he said it was not a doctor. Like his story kept changing. He could never identify where this supposed conversion therapy took place, or, he was just making up stories. And then later in life, he started dressing like a woman, calling himself they, them. This is him. This is a picture of him at a college. This is all of this woke infiltration of colleges. This is a picture of him at the University of Nebraska at Omaha. They brought him in to give a guest lecture where he's teaching young men how to engage in kink and how to engage in puppy play and dress like dogs and have sex with each other while one is dressed like a dog and leading each other around on a leash and pretending to be a dog and making dog noises and all of the disgusting, degenerate stuff that goes along with this. This was at a college. This is what some parents paid for their children to be exposed to. I think it's quite all right to make moral judgments in a society and to so-called kink shame aberrant, abnormal, degenerate behavior like this that's not aimed towards the good, but it's aimed towards the evil. I think we are called to do that, in fact. I think we are called to say this is wrong. There's a benefit to a society that has the courage to create a culture, to protect and maintain a culture that engages in healthy shaming. There's a benefit to that. And one of those benefits is that society doesn't fall apart to the point at which people start pushing for and even begging for authoritarianism. I think Sam Brinton, for example, should be able to dress up. Of course, he should be able to dress up like a dog, teach other people how to dress up like dogs, whatever, in sex play. Gross, but it should be legal. And I think it should also be encouraged for us to say that's socially shameful behavior, right? So that we don't reach a place where you get people saying, outlaw it. That's the benefit of having a society that hasn't pulled out all of the cultural and moral fence posts. When you get to a place where things are so perverted and so degenerate and there's no social moral code and there's nothing socially, culturally to disincentivize people from sliding into perversion, When you get to that place as a society, then you suddenly start seeing people clamoring for authoritarianism. Use force to do it. Use the government to do it, right? I don't want to get to that place. I don't want to get to the place where suddenly my neighbors and friends and family are saying, let's have more government force, because otherwise this degeneracy isn't going to stop, you know? I don't want to get to that place. We're in the place right now where we've been fighting in this culture war, this spiritual war, for many years now, to be able to say what we think, even if it's not popular at the moment, because we hope it will become popular at one point. So all of this to say, when you see people engaging in perverted behavior, when you see them engaging publicly and being lauded for it and being propped up for it and celebrated for it and in degenerate perverted behavior, like maybe you have a fear of saying something about it because, like in the case of Andrew Tate, there are people out there saying he's on our side. I'm sorry. He's not on my side. He's not on my side. God's side is the way of truth, of light, of love, of holiness, of purity, of good. That's my side. My side is not like people who say some of the same things that I say about policy. A good con artist, a successful con artist, a successful shakedown man like Tate, they always say some things that are true. Always. Think of the slimy televangelists, the hypocritical televangelists. They're always going to say some things that are true. And it works. On some segment of the population, it works. If you want to learn more about this, read more about cults. Watch more cult documentaries. You can watch it happen in a microcosm on a smaller scale. And that helps it explain to me anyway how it happens on a large scale. How people fall in with obviously bad and evil ideology like woke ideology. How they fall in with, following con men, giving money to people like Andrew Tate and propping them up. And even now, I think he's like talking about running for office. And there are people that are like, yeah, I'm like, what? No. You don't fix a problem with another problem. You don't fix a bad ideology with another bad ideology. You don't fix bad behavior with more bad behavior. It doesn't make any sense. Yes, John, it's low resolution and or low information people. That's how I think of it. It's the counterfeit, says Kiwi. Yes. Yes. Jason. Hey, Jason. He says, it reminds me of that South Park episode where students were expected to be tolerant and accepting of explicit things about anal sex. Yes. It's so weird how woke has done this. They've simultaneously pushed two conflicting ideas. The postmodernist part of woke, which says there is no good or evil, there is no right or wrong, there is no absolute truth. And at the same time, they've pushed their own moral framework of what is right and wrong and what is true and what is false. They've pushed both at the same time. And many people have figured out that their moral framework and their idea of what's right and wrong and their idea of what's true and false is bad. But we've slowly accepted a lot of the postmodernist part of like any moral framework is bad. There is no right or wrong. There is no good or evil. Don't make any moral judgments. Don't take any stance. Don't stand for anything. Don't say that anything is good for people and something else is bad for people. A lot of people have just sort of soaked that up. And so my point in this jumble of thoughts that I had about today's episode is just that, I don't know, hopefully more people will start thinking about these things and you'll help me sort out my thoughts on it. Maybe in the comments if you have any disagreements or questions or things that you're thinking about more about this, let me know. Let me hear from you in the comments, because it's going to help me to sort out my thoughts on it more. And I think mostly I just want people, if you're like me, I was in this place when I left woke where for a while I was afraid to make any kind of a moral judgment at all. I was still in that postmodernist part of woke where it was sort of like, oh, it's a bad thing to say that some people are bad, or some people have bad ideas, or some people engage in bad behavior. That certain behaviors are bad and we shouldn't keep shame and we shouldn't do, and it took me a little bit to see my way out of that hole. Quite frankly, it was a hole. And if you're there, I'm telling you, these are the questions you should be asking yourself. Do I believe in objective truth? How do I find out what truth is? Do I believe in objective morality? Do I believe that some things are good and some things are bad? Absent legality. Legality is just what we as humans have gotten together with consensus and said, okay, we all still agree that XYZ is definitely bad. Like that minors can't consent, for example. Although we've been breaking that one a lot lately when it comes to so-called gender affirming care. But these are things that roughly, as from the libertarian point of view, for example, don't hit people, don't steal their stuff, right? Like don't hurt someone else and don't steal their stuff. A lot of our laws are based in those two ideas. And we all still agree on those. But there's other things that we don't, as a society, we're like, well, you should be free to do that. But generally speaking, we think it's bad for you. Like addiction is one. Thankfully, we haven't reached a place where people are afraid to say, hey, alcoholism's bad for you. Thankfully, we still say it. We're still calling that one out. We have gotten to a place where with porn, I've talked about this before, it's a little bit different with porn addiction and stuff. If you start saying, I've done episodes on porn addiction, people get riled up. Like, how dare you judge? How dare you? I'm like, because I think it's bad for people. I'm trying to think of some of the others. Some people have mentioned pot smoking. There seems to be right now this social idea, the societal idea that you shouldn't judge people for smoking too much pot. I think it's bad for you if you smoke too much pot. I do. I think you're disconnecting too much if you're addicted to it all the time, right? Don't be afraid to figure out what you think is right and wrong. Elsa Barrett, they get real mad when you tell them that their corn is bad. Oh, do you mean porn or corn? Because they also get mad, Elsa, if you talk about high fructose corn syrup and how bad that is. Don't talk about my corn. Don't criticize my seed oils. I don't want to be reminded that my seed oils are bad for me. Yeah. It won't let me say corn with a P. I see. That was just funny because it could go both ways, corn or porn. John says, I'm willing to say some ideas are worse than others. Yes, that's all we have to. We can't get to that place where they've convinced us that no culture is better than any other culture, that no ideas are better than any other ideas. And, everyone is equally deserving of the respect. No, respect is earned. It's not something that you dole out just evenly. Squat and Pete, my hubby hates it when I tell him to pick healthier mayo. Oh yeah, sometimes we don't like that when people, even though they have our best interests at heart, like, hey, I think this is bad for you. I know that as someone who struggled with drinking for a long time. It did used to bother me when people would mention it, but I'm glad they did. The few who did, I'm glad they did. Speaking of healthier mayo, if you try it, I don't know if you've tried it at Squat and Pea, but there's an avocado one that I want to try because I don't really like regular mayonnaise that much anyway. 'Cause I do like it on tomato sandwiches and stuff. And I saw that there's one that's made out of avocado, and that was interesting to me. I love avocado oil or something. If you try that one, let me know in the chat later on what you thought of it. Somebody said, wow, I learned so much. Kiwi, wow, I learned so much on your show. Oof. Sorry about the dark stuff we looked at today. Sam Brenton, the castration website guy. Apologies. But I thought those were good examples to make the point that, yeah, it's okay to make moral judgments. It's okay to kink shame. Skillet Actual, thank you for the super chat, Skillet, for $10. Skillet says, potentially hard question. Where's the line with shaming? Sex out of wedlock used to be shamed. Homosexuality was shamed. Autogynephilia was shamed. Pedophilia is, for now, shamed, etc. That's a great question. And your answer is going to depend on your belief system. That's what I think anyway. I'm a Christian, so I believe in the moral order that God has set out. And so I turn to scripture on whether things are good for humans or bad for humans. Some things, like I said, we just know innately here. And you're like, oh, and scripture aligns with that, what I know here already, like pedophilia, for example. I think a lot of things that we culturally have gotten to the place of where we've tried to normalize aberrant behavior. We've almost tried to reverse engineer like that gut feeling of disgust that you have about certain things that you're supposed to have. I think that's happening with a lot of things, and they're trying to do that right now with pedophilia. They're trying to do that by renaming it things like minor attracted person and things like that. Marriage out of wedlock, that's an example you gave. So, or not marriage out of wedlock, sorry, sex out of wedlock. So I think sex out of wedlock is immoral. I think it's a sin. I think that's what scripture says. And when I became a Christian, that was one of those things that I was sort of like trying to pick and choose at the very beginning, where I was like, well, I don't really understand why it says that. So, I was trying to like have it both ways. And this is my experience. And maybe there are other people who converted later in life like me. I don't know if you've had this experience or not, but God convicted me on it. Like, it was really it wasn't my own choosing, but he convicted me on it, meaning every time I opened my Bible, it would be a verse that made me think about it. Every time I went to church, there would be, even if it wasn't the subject of the sermon, there would be verses and stuff that were things that were talked about that made me think about it. And he was really convicting my heart on it until I finally came to the place where I was like, okay, I don't have to understand why that's in there, but it's in there. And God is clearly calling me on this issue. He's calling me about it constantly. And so it got to that place where I was like, I'm going to try and live what he's telling me to live on this issue. Now, do I go out and when I see people, friends who are living together and aren't married, do I hammer them on it? Do I post about it like I did about, Tate pimping girls out? No. I think there's a hierarchy of all sin is evil, but I think there's a hierarchy in terms of the danger that different things are causing to society, and sort of like put the biggest fires out first. I'll say what I think about it when people ask me about it. Sometimes I do talk about it or post about it, but I don't think that means that you should treat people poorly because they're non-believers or because they're living in sin. I don't think that's what's called for. And at some point, people took things like, they took this idea of not being jerks to sinners, and we're all sinners. And they said not being jerks to sinners means we should also get to a place where we don't even consider these things sins. And I think that was wrong. Does that make sense? Jacob's over on Rumble. We are simulcasting on Rumble today. Jacob says, but isn't it time we started talking about destigmatizing cannibalism? Yeah, we're not too far from that place, right? They're going to get us there eventually if they have their way. They'll get us there eventually. Rock Lexicon. Wow, I thought I was pretty blackpilled, and then Keri told me about the eunuch maker. Yeah, that case is the Marius Gustavson case is just crazy. If you are into true crime, that's one. If you're fascinated by the depravity, the depths of human evil, that's one I would say to look into. Also because it's so interesting that so much of what society is willing to say was wrong about what he was doing, we're currently doing to people. We're currently doing to people and calling it gender affirming care. Isn't that weird? Yeah. John says, God first loved us, even those of us who hated him. Yeah, I did hate God for a long time. Skillet, thank you for that hard question, because it's going to make me think how to better express myself. I know what I think about that, but sometimes it's hard for me to articulate it. Okay. I think the plumber's going to be here shortly, so I'm going to wrap this one up. I mostly just wanted to get us thinking and talking about moral judgments, about so-called kink shaming, about this reluctance that's been instilled, especially in younger people, to make any kind of moral judgment at all, except for morally judging those who would make a moral judgment, right? and I want to encourage people to stop doing that. And if you catch yourself saying something like, I don't mean to kink shame, it's like, wait, why are you saying that? Why are you saying that? Aren't some things bad? I think it's okay. I think it's okay to say, I think that's bad. That's it. If you didn't get a chance to see it yesterday, I put out an interview or discussion that I had with Mikhail Olson. He's a Christian writer and podcaster. He writes for the Federalist. And we had a whole talk about this new phrase, woke right. What does it mean? What does it mean when he uses it? There's a lot of defining terms in that episode. Is it a threat to the church? Is it Christian? Is it compatible with Christianity? And I would really encourage you to go and watch it. I had such a great time talking with him, and I'm definitely going to have him back on at some point, maybe on the Christian panel or something. We'll bring him on. I didn't get to watch it when it aired. We pre-recorded it because of I was working last night, and so I wasn't around it. But I did see some people left some really thoughtful comments, like some long comments, and I just haven't. I worked until like 10 p.m. last night, and I just haven't had a chance to look at those and respond to them yet, but I appreciate it. And even if you're disagreeing with me or with what he's saying, I really appreciate you taking the time to write long, thoughtful commentary on it. And I'm going to go check those out later today. So thank you. Here, I'm about to leave, but let me show you this, by the way. As you know, our house is, we got heat, and we have now insulated under the house, so it's warmer than it was last year, but it's still pretty cold. Look at this dog. Look at him in his little, this is his bathrobe. Look at his eyes closing. He's like, he could almost fall asleep with me holding him straight up because he's so warm in this little, this stupid doggy bathrobe. Therese says Tiger looks high. Well, he's really toasty because I got a space heater here, Therese, and he's in his warm little jacket, and he's just like loving it. He's just lounging around like all super toasty and warm. Oh, Jason, I'm sorry to hear about that, about your brother's dog. I'm sorry. Well, you guys stay warm and have a good, yeah, he is warm and sleepy, Davina. Have a good weekend. If this episode got you thinking about anything, and like I said, you have questions or thoughts or disagreements, like feel free to leave them in the chat. It really helps me out to help me better formulate what I'm trying to say. LXP, don't go. Well, there is a plumber coming soon, so if I don't leave now, you're going to hear the dog barking probably, and then it'll scare everybody. Hey, James. Take care, dude. Good to see you. I'll see you guys on Monday. Okay. Take care. Bye. Where's the button? There it is.